I guess. So today we will talk about that what we can do better, because every day we are facing these routing security issues in our daily life. Starting from 2008, you all know about that YouTube story, and then route hijack, prefix hijack, route leak is our everyday incident. So how we can do better? Done on 2021. Can go to the next slide. These are some of the news you will find every day in our news. So what we can do better, that's the thing we will try to find out today. This is another list, huge list from May to June 2021. So every day we are facing this problem. So routing security is a big issue right now, and how we can make it better, what we can do. So that's the thing we will try to find out today. We have a distinguished panel today, starting from Kenny Huang, which is TWNIC, is a board of directors, and also you know him, he is an APrIGF EC on my most left side. Then we have Carmen Diaz, who is director of ISP Yucatan and also board member of LACNIC. Also on my left is Terry. Terry is a very known guy to APrIGF because he is a very famous city. All the technical guys know Terry. Terry, I will start with you. So Terry, huge amount of incidents happens all the time. Is it intentional or is it misconfiguration?
Well, normally we don't find about the motivation of the incident until well after. Normally there's a lot of work to clean up the mess caused, and then later on there'll be some diagnostics, and sometimes it comes out that it's configuration errors of what we call fat fingers, and sometimes less likely it's something very intentional. There's plenty of good cases that have been recorded where it's just simply someone doing the wrong thing with a filter. But there's also a couple of cases that are very well documented. I think one was the Amazon DNS attack, which was designed purely to steal cryptocurrency. And another one was one of the precursor events for all of this was, I think, the Pakistani ISP who tried to hijack YouTube in 2008 or thereabouts. But no, you don't know exactly what goes on. In most cases, you get an RFO if you're lucky, and then you find out. But it could be days, weeks, or even months after. So we don't know. When in situ, very unlikely you know the reason.
Good commentary. No, every event happens, but we don't know the RFO. And nobody wants to share the RFO what's happened, right?
Well, it can be very embarrassing if it's the mistake that's been made. So yes.
Thank you, Terry, for your comment. My next question will be to Kenny. Dr. Kenny, most of the places, like when we are developing our policies in the cybersecurity policies, is it from the policymakers or from the enterprise, we found the routing security part is very less, probably 1 or 2 lines. Why is that?
I think the answer is quite straightforward. You can count how many audience down to the stage, and not so many audience. That's just for people who are interested in internet governance. Not to mention the policymaker. If you ask the policymaker what is BGP, they probably just fall down. If the topic is too complicated, even the professional network operator, they have a 24-hour, 7 days working in the data center, still have difficulty to maintain a proper route configuration. Not to mention another routing configuration, it depends on quite a lot depends on your neighborhood. And that kind of trust basically is the trust by rumor, because you don't have the full picture of the global routing table, and you just based on what you trusted your partner to feed you a route information, and based on basic trust, you forward the information to your partner. So actually, technology-wise, it's very complicated, not to mention the political implication. I think that create a barrier not to general public, but also to the policymaker as well.
Thank you. Carmen, next questions to you. are we not reaching to that wider community or the CXO or the regulators or the policymakers? Or we are really afraid of that?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and in this conversation, this panel. Really, I share my opinion from my approach of the network community, network operator. I agree with Terry about their comments, and really now my community is very far about the sensibility of their relevance of their participation in action about apport in regulator policy, because we work in day to day for the operating of our network, like say in this case we need work in action in how we can involve our participation in like an ecosystem in internet. We need build and rebuild our capabilities in training, not only in training, in technical training. It's very important our participation and training in internet governance. Okay, because we are like in day to day, we build the internet in operation, but we forgot our responsibilities about how dream the operation in action, and in this case in apport in policies and regulator. Sorry for my English. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. I think coming to the comment from Carmen, like to those things, training is one of the most issue, right? Terry, the question comes to you. We have done so many workshops, so many webinars. In COVID time, we have so many tutorials online, starting from APrIGF, and all the RIRs did this thing. So what's wrong with this thing? Like, is it not enough, or is it why it's not creating that impact?
Well, I disagree with the not what's enough, because there are economies around the APrIGF region which are doing phenomenally well with ROA deployment, especially in South Asia, India, Bangladesh, and others, Sri Lanka, are past 90% coverage with ROA on their networks. So that part of the equation is done and dusted. The next part of the problem that we're addressing with training is getting people to deploy validation. And validation's harder because that normally means that they have to have engineers educated in doing, replying party software, RTR, and so on. And that's where we're now really attacking that problem by running training across the region to get there. Now, we also have several large organizations, global carriers and so on, who've implemented ROV. So they're leading the charge, and there are now also providers out there who, when they sell transit, are telling their customers they must deploy this now. So the traction is actually quite good. I think we'll probably see it steadily boil up. I think we were looking at 30 to 40%, depending on the region, for coverage recently. And that's been going up very steadily. It's not stalled. It would be nice if we get to 100 sooner rather than later. But the training is definitely having an impact, because it not just educates people, it also causes engagement, and it also actually gets people going back into their organizations and back into their economies, saying, hey, this is a problem, we need to fix it. So we're getting some traction.
Thank you, Terry. Kenny, you were an APrIGF EC for a long time. and we are really happy. So ROA, many of the countries have 98% ROA, right, in Asian countries. But still we are seeing the validation, ROV, is very less. Few of the operators, they are doing ROV. And that's why this routing leakage and routing security incidents happening every day. Why ROV is not coming?
Thank you, Chair. I think it still come to a very natural way because you deploy infrastructure based on different stage. For the initial stage, we deploy our encourage people to deploy RPKI router and make sure they have router installed in their RPKI server, in the CA server, in the backend database. So when the initial deployment is ready, then second stage will be how can we validate the route? Because once you activate the route validation, that become a partially commitment. You are willing to commit to the advanced infrastructure you trust with the technology, with the operation. So that means you have trust to that kind of emerging technologies such as RPKI. And once you have trust, you are more comfortable to fully activate the route validation function. So I think time will change quickly. If a large tier 1 ISP or tier 1 carrier, they're starting to validate their route and enforce their downstream service provider to do the same thing, I think that will be activated very soon. If the RPKI become a commonly deployed infrastructure, I think it's ready run very quickly.
Carmen, any idea from LACNIC?
About the deployment of the RPKI that I can share, I would like to share that in the region in Latin American Caribbean, now we are working in the development and the support in our community, in support in coordination with our national operators groups. We are working in trainings and the sensibilization about the relevance of the adoption of the manners, for example. And in the last 2 years, the adoption of the RPKI was strong. Is strong in this moment. For example, in the past January in 2020, before of the pandemic, the adoption was the 9%, and now we have the adoption in RPKI in 28%. And it's not slow, it's growing in this moment. It's other our reality, our and in this other situation that we are live in this moment is work in our communities, not in only community. For example, we are work in focus, for example, in communities like network operator for universities, and because they have their own issues and requirements. And now we are focused in make special training in this for this focus of this community, on their community. And bueno, about the other that I can share is the diffusion and when the support, for example, the diffusion over the relevance of the routing security in a space like, for example, our events in the LACNIC, where our events in our regional events. And there we are share our we can do for be better or for make better internet in our countries. It's just for a moment. Thank you.
Carmen, the next question is also for you. Like you said that it is increasing. So I want to know that what kind of special strategy you are using to increase the adoption rate.
Okay. Yes. Like I share in our region LAC in Latin American Caribbean. Now we are work in diffusion, but it's very relevant share that the relevance of the importance of the work, for example, together our real LACNIC together with LACIX or LACIX, that is Association for Internet Exchange Points in Latin American Caribbean, because they build an ecosystem in our countries. But we work together with the LACNOC, that is the Network Operation Group for our region LAC. But we are work together. We are work like same family, but we are not make one only training for only community. We are show what is the reality of each country, and inside of their country we show what is the situation and the needs and the problems of each mini communities. For example, small ISP, they not have the same problem of the big ISP. And we are working in feel what is their requirement and their issues, and we can do in support with their other organization. We support, for example, with our Manners Fellows in this year is Mauricio Oviedo from Costa Rica, and the last 2 years we had other fellows in their line of training, and I think they're very important situation. All the information of about the how we need apply any configuration is in English, but our community, our languages is Spanish, and look at me. For me, it's very difficult to speak English, but it's other of the boundary for a front, no? And as we did our speakers and our trainers and in our languages. Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Carmen, thank you. It's excellent comment. I'm on a team. I'm from Bangladesh. My native language is Bangla, and also Dr. Kenny. Terry is only English language. I think in the crowd you will so many people whose native language. Very good comment and very important comment. And also in ethnic community, we requested ethnic, I think 2020, that included Bangla as a language. So after that, we found that all the documents, not all, the important documents like policy SIG and other issues, they converted into Bangla, and then they post in their websites. Kenny, next question is what are the strategy ethnic is taking to increase the RPK adoption rate? higher?
I think still, Terry already mentioned a little bit, APrIGF provide quite significant amount of capacity building program and to all network operator. And so far, we target all the network operator in this region, including Southeast Asia and some of the Asia country. And we have a lot of serious capacity building training course. And also we have APrIGF Academy. Also, people can just subscribe the online lecture about RPKI deployment. So that's regarding to one way of communication. What I'm going to suggest we can do better from APrIGF perspective is we should target different stakeholders. For example, you're talking about policymaker. We should propose, advocate some simple principle about routing security to let government policymaker understand what can they do from regulation, from policy making to improve the routing security in a very simple language and very simple principle, because they are not engineering. And we also need to have some sort of capacity or even online lecture for the people who are interested in routing security. For example, like a lot of young generation sit on the floor, they don't have basic knowledge about routing security, or not routing security, basic understanding about TCP/IP. So we probably need to using very simple language to advocate, to educate them what is a basic recipe about routing security. So at least we can target additional stakeholder to improve the capacity building. That's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming to Terry. Terry, I think for network engineers, it is very hard to convince your bosses, managers and CTOs and CXO. And if you want to introduce routing security, they will tell that why we need routing security, or why we need RPKI, or why you need ROV. Now, bringing that to your business, what we can do?
Well, it's probably the standard cybersecurity argument. It's not about getting a return on investment from something you've spent, thinking it's an interest rate coming back to you. What it is it's like a car's collision avoidance system. We're going to spend this money so that ongoing, we don't spend huge amounts on major incidents. So if the last major incidents cost us $1 million, we should be prepared to spend a large percentage of $1 million to make sure it never happens again. So that becomes an impetus for your CTO. Now, the other parts of the C-suite might go, well, we're not going to spend that money again, are we? Of course, what they unfortunately will need to happen to them on occasion is they need to have a major incident once, and then everyone's on board. Let's spend the money, let's get this done.
Interesting, Terry. So like converting your knowledge into ROI, return of investment, right?
So yeah, again, if you're prepared to put money into increasing the quality of your operations, that not only gives you a payback in, say, avoiding incidents, it also means you can streamline some of your operations if you deploy some automation so that you don't need technical knowledge in the hands of absolutely everybody. That helps as well. So that investment's not just good for cybersecurity and routing security, it also means customers and stakeholders also benefit as well. So again, it's hard to quantify the return because the return is a lack of something happening. So it becomes difficult in that regard.
Very hard. For a network engineer, it is very hard to convince his manager. Another big problem is that, like Kenny already said, if I'm read you correctly, involving the government, right? Right. Question to Terry and all of you. Involving the government, is it really solve the problem, or is it brings a new problem? How will see that one?
Very good question. That's a really good question. I never thought about it. Could be create a new problem as well. Anyway, depends on you are cyber sovereignty country or you are probably support free open internet country. If you are cyber sovereignty country, we probably, no matter you introduce the routing security with or with not routing security, they still find a way to block all the communication they want. So the reason I asked to encourage the stakeholder, increase the government stakeholder into the community is, because they have the power, this is policy power, they have regulation power. At least they can understand the basic requirement. I didn't say we can solve the whole internet security problem because the internet security problem is everywhere. But we can find a way to mitigate routing security issue while we need to focus on routing security issue. Even single one route outage could create a national disaster, could create a very serious problem. It's not just something like a virus. It's the routing outage could be impacted the whole community as well. So the government need to be aware of the severity of that kind of issue and how to prevent that kind of issue. For example, like an internet society have advocate different kind of principle and process for different stakeholders, like to operator, to internet exchange provider. I believe if we can create another stakeholder to the government or policymaker, what they need to know, what they can do in terms of policy. So all the government just copy and paste from an internet society webpage, that would be much easier. Thank you.
Carmen, your comment?
Oh, it's interesting reflection. I would like talk about my country. I'm from Mexico. In this case, in my country, nothing have few people think about the routing security. Few people. and the government not thinks in that in these issues or now. The ecosystem is focused in this moment in the deployment, for example, of the infrastructure connectivity, and now my country is working in deploy, for example, of the internet resource for small ISP, but that is the great opportunity for work in their news in commerce. There is their news network operating with news internet resource, because we can work with there when there is in the initial configuration for BGP. And I see new opportunity that the work together, for example, of the university that can help at their small ISP, and we can work in provide support and formation and new generation. In build their capabilities from the university for new engineers and form in not only in terms technical. It's very important if the education in all about the internet governance and the part of the ecosystems, and which is our role in our chair, for example, like network operators. No? And I would like to share more about other terms, but thank you, Simon.
Terry, any comment on that?
Well, interestingly, the Australian government now has a cybersecurity framework which actually mentions RPKI and ROV and actually recommends that service providers deploy it. And if they wanted to, we have a telecommunications security framework in Australia where the minister, if they were inclined, could sign an order telling all ISPs to deploy it if they wanted to. So there's actually a law and a framework in place. My problem with that framework itself is it's not very well promoted. It's like buried 2 or 3 page scrolls down on a web page somewhere. And until you actually find it and read it and go, oh, that's what they're saying, that makes great sense. but just knowing it's there and going and finding it's a huge problem. So again, it's awareness as opposed to anyone's willingness or not to do so.
What do you think, like Australian government is doing that one? Can this thing is adopted by these small countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan?
Quite possibly. I'm pretty sure the Australian government lifted most of their text off NIST, the US standards as well. So there are plenty of places you can go to that have text that could be used and reused in these policies. So yeah, it's probably a lot easier, a lot easier to ask your governments to say, well, can we have a policy? Can we have a recommendation, as opposed to saying, can we have regulation or laws? Because quite honestly, when it comes to the internet, you think about anything that's a technical solution, the laws that normally are obeyed are in RFCs, ITF standards. They're not the laws of the land or the laws of the country. So unless a router is going to enforce it, I don't see how you can get a police officer to enforce it, so to speak.
So we are almost like my questions are ending, and also we need to take questions from from our Zoom and also from our distinguished guest. Last line from each one of you. Routing security, we can do it better. How? And what we should take? Just one line.
Only one line?
Yes.
Yeah, before people go away, go outside the room, I wish you understand what is APrIGF and all we stand for. I think that's something you can take away. But anyway, I just refocus again, and involve different stakeholders will be critical, and communication with different stakeholders will be critical, because the internet was composed by hundreds of thousands of network connect together. We trust each other to forward packet for us. So we need to co-work together. Thank you.
Carmen?
Well, I invite to work together in the return to the essential of the internet, and work in action coordinated that promote manners. We need see an only community. We are in an only internet, and we need work together and coordinate.
Sherry.
I'm known to say that one of the groups that could actually make this happen is internet users. They could go to the internet service providers and demand that the space that they occupy on the internet is covered by a ROA, and that their internet service providers do ROV. So if a customer is paying for it and the customer demands it, business leaders and business owners are more likely to do it.
Thank you. Aftab bhai.
Right. Thank you, Aftab Siddiqui, Internet Society. I have one question, as what Terry mentioned, that internet users can play a role. The problem we see is we have failed to create interest of general user in anything related to security other than the application level security, right? Anything below that, no one cares about it, right? So how do you bring that knowledge to the masses, that there is something more than just ransomware? There's more to the security. The security is an ecosystem rather than just installing a antivirus in your laptop. So how do you bring that information, that knowledge to the masses? Or they never cared in the past, they still don't care, and we have to sort it ourselves. How do you do that?
Well, it always comes down to education, doesn't it? Because quite often, if people are subject to ransomware or online fraud or something similar, that issue pops up, and then the government decides, well, we'll start educating people about this. So at least we've got recommendations now, but those programs, every time the Australian government does any sort of awareness or scam watch, they should probably say, well, actually, how about your ISPs also do this? It will help protect you.
Kenny, your comment?
Thank you. I think that's a tough question, really. If I have answer, I can respond to you right away. But unfortunately, I don't have a right answer. But I believe the people sit downstairs, especially for young generation, they can provide a better answer than mine. And for example, when I talk to a genius of the network guy, And he talked to me, IPv6 is a human right. I've been advocating IPv6 for decades, and I never consider IPv6 is a human right. And after he explanation about why IPv6 should be a human right, I realized, hey, that makes sense. So I believe people from different expertise, from different whole new paradigm, they can consider in different way. So I trust, I don't have a proper answer for that, but I believe the young generation, they can do. Thank you.
Kenny, it could be done like RPK could be a human rights to somewhere.
Thank you. Yet another Australian, but actually one of those internet end user people, not a techie person at all. I'm just a humble person paying bills every month like everybody else. So coming back to your point, Terry, and riffing off what I think you were asking is, yes, education is definitely the, in inverted commas, answer. But if you're going to get the buying power of the average end user, you're going to have to make it a metaphor-based education. It's going to have to be given in examples that are meaningful to current thinking and experience. So back to the old bit that you'll see with certain digital identity issues where they've got people, doing ads where they're plastering up the first page of their passport on a wall, or, just make really blatantly obvious examples, and don't expect that visceral reaction will have every bit as much market value in how they pressure their ISPs as any technical knowledge. You don't have to understand why you need copper, not lead water pipes. You just have to understand you'd prefer to drink out of one or the other.
Interesting take. I might just say that the reality may be we only need 5 of those customers per ISP to take out a ticket and start complaining about the lack of ROA. It may only need that. Yes, everyone in the room, if your ISP doesn't have ROAs, start a ticket tonight. Where are my ROAs?
So anyone has a question? Shown by any new champs? I think sitting.
This is Shubhan from Bangladesh. I have a question to actually Aftab, is the manners chair. So when actually manners thinking to add ROV in their manners compliance list?
Okay, yes. So for anyone not very familiar with manners, so we have 4 actions. One of the actions says that you should be able to verify information, routing information. Right now, it is not mandatory to have RPKI, and that's what Somanbai is referring to. The reason for that not making it mandatory is it has some relationship with the legacy space. So the legacy space holders cannot create RPKI ROAs, and making it mandatory means we will be excluding them from the initiative. And that was the issue from the very beginning. I'm myself being a very strong proponent of RPKI, can't do anything while leading the project itself. And that is the whole reason, because the moment you make it mandatory, it exclude, it's a very tiny portion of the whole global routing table, but that tiny portion are those operators and entities who started the internet. So, and most of them are academia. So if we exclude them, then it will be a little bit of disservice, but I absolutely want to, and the steering committee of the manners want to make it mandatory as early as possible once the politics around the RPKI legacy is resolved. So we do not want to go into that one, but at least, yes, there is an issue. We try to address it with other data sources, which is IRR, which is, to put it nicely, is garbage. But it's in the absence of global RPKI, that is the only option we have. It is a problem. And again, it's a lot of, it is a very technical issue as well as it's a very political issue. So we can't just resolve it quite easily. And mandating is, again, one question which Simon, you asked, how do you, if we talk to the governments or the policy makers, then they only have one stick. And that's what happens. We went to a lot of policymakers in this arena, and they came up with the policy saying, if you do not register with APrIGF or any other RIR, your resources will be out. So there's always a there are always pros and cons. So, yeah, while we would like to have security, there are some consequences if we try to push it a little bit harder. Yeah, so Kenny.
Just some addition. Basically, as I mentioned, we don't solve all the internet security all at once because it's not likely we can do it in our whole life. And so the strategy we have is divide and conquer. We try to partition the problem, try to partition the issues, and we solve issue one by one. Of course, meanwhile, still create new problem, new issues, but that's the only way we can do is divide and conquer. That's it. Thank you.
Anyone has any question or comment? We don't have any comment. Yeah, just one comment from, yes, we need a capacity building. Someone?
Yeah, just to add with after what said on that, is there is a challenge definitely for historical address spaces. It's a big challenge. And APrIGF have some initiative to bring them actually with RPKI. Probably that will help in this region. But if I just say that if we recommend to deploy route ROV at for the downstream customers for the ISPs or the military ISPs, that can significantly reduce actually coming up invalid prefixes to generate in the routing table. So we know that all part of the region like LACNIC has only 28%. So that is they're far behind. But in some country where 90%, 98% ROA, they can actually, if they just verify in downstream, that will prevent some sort of incidents. Like in the morning you were discussing one incident, you were presenting that mistake from ISPs. So that can actually prevent if we can do that actually. So that is something probably we can advocate intermediately at this moment.
So
that's coming from me. Yeah.
I think to summarize, Sohel, so like doing ROA is not the only thing, right? So we have to drop the invalids and we have to dissipate these things. And to the wider audience, I think who are also in the Zoom, mainly at this moment, 35% ROA is done around the world. Still so miles to go. So still we have to work. Terry, you want to give a comment?
Well, I was going to say you mentioned dropping invalids. You drop invalids out of the routing table. I would go a step further. I would talk about the edge of your network also disallowing traffic entry to a network if it's from an invalid source, which is something we found is quite prevalent. Even though they're running ROV, they're still letting the traffic in as well if it makes it their way to the network. I just saw that question. Can you provide us training about digital security? I would encourage you to go to the APrIGF Academy website, register, it's free, and there are some basic courses there on these subjects. And there are also obviously, if you have access to LinkedIn and other platforms, there are some good courses that are free online, which are worth doing.
I think we don't have any question. Also, there is no question from the Zoom. Thank you to the lovely audience, very small audience we have. We have very small audience on the Zoom also, but we have a very distinguished panel this time. Thank you, Dr. Kenny, Carmen Diaz, thank you, and thank you, Terry. Thank you, everyone. And hopefully next year, if we come to with this session in APrIGF, probably our ROA will be increased. Thank you.